Hey there, YouTubes. This is Grimweird coming back at you with more Enigmatica 2 Expert Mod Pack playthrough action for Minecraft 1.12.2, and this is E2E version 1.75. So we are in gaming things. We're on Draconic Evolution and bragging rights. So right now I'm making a push towards the creative tank so that we can have infinite amounts of molten metals and other liquids. That's going to be sort of our first main stop here. And we're going to do enough Draconic Evolution to make that happen. And then we will continue on with the other creatives. And we're actually going to have to go pretty far into Draconic Evolution to get a Chaos Shard, because we'll need good Draconic armor, I think, to face the Chaos Dragon. But right now, basically what I'm doing is I'm just rounding things up. I'm rounding things up for the creative fluid tank, which is sort of my top priority at the moment. I'm rounding things up for ultimate ingots. You can see it takes ultimate ingots and Anglesite. And so I'm rounding up the stuff for the ultimate ingots. And I'm rounding up the stuff for the Anglesite. And so what we're doing right now is we need to make a bunch of, like, we got the prescient crystals, which require shulker soul vials. And so we want to make a bunch of those. We've got, we need a bunch of ender crystals for enderman souls for the ender crystals, for making a huge batch of Anglesite. We need enticing crystal. We need a whole bunch of villager souls. The villager souls necessary for that. So basically that's what we're up to right now, is just making a bunch of souls so we can mass produce some Anglesite. The clathrates we got through advanced rocketry recently. I've been sure to use my induction smelter from Thermal Foundation pretty often, so we have plenty of rich slag. We've done the environmental ore miner thing, environmental tech ore miner thing. So we have plenty of these crystals from the void miner. So now I'm just basically making sure we have plenty of souls. Octadic capacitors, I just got through making a bunch of charged draconium, so I'll show you that setup. But right now we just need a whole bunch of souls. I did like a quick count. If we look at uses, I want a couple for my Infinity Booster card. I want, if we look here, all the creative stuff we're going to do, we're going to need, like, 4 there, Anglesite there, 4 there, 4 there, 4 there, 12 there, 4, etc. So taking a look through things, I'm looking at wanting to make, roughly 36 or so Anglesite, and I might have to make some more for singularities later, but for right now, I think around a 36 is a good first batch of Anglesite, which means I need about 36 Enderman souls and 36 villager souls and 36 shulker souls and 36 of the some other soul. And so we've made power spawners. We already had power spawners for witches and endermen, so I just made one for shulker and villager. And we've got this just moderately automated. So if we take a look at the powered spawner, we have switched this toggle here from spawn to capture. And so now, as you can see there, if you put in a bunch of soul vials and put in a capacitor, you can see that this capacitor has a powered spawner of 3.62, so it's a really good capacitor for powered spawners to speed this process up. And I got that from some loot chest somewhere. But basically we are just spamming this through and collecting a whole bunch of souls. And I did put a modicum of automation on this, so basically it's smart enough to only extract from the finished product, so I didn't need to filter it. That's always a pleasant surprise. It's not taking my empty vials out. And so we're just sucking the finished products out, no filter necessary, and then we're just importing, oh, and we're done already. We're just importing empty soul vials into it. And once we get done with making about a stack of Endermen, I want to make about maybe 64 of each of these 4 critters: Witch, Enderman, Villager, and Shulker. So which we have about 64 souls for each. See, I've got some more in here. That'll probably be plenty. That will be plenty for Anglesite and probably plenty for the rest of the game. So that should be good. So let's see. I think I'm 1 soul vial short because I had to go capture something. So I'm going to go ahead and throw 1 more empty vial in there. All right. So that's one thing. Let's go take a look at some other stuff that's going on. Actually, I'm going to pause here. I'm going to wait for this to finish and set up the next thing, set up some witches, and then we'll go take a look at some other stuff that I've set up in the last couple days. Okay, and my Enderman finished, so I have slapped my witch one in here. I've got my 64 soul vials in there. We're going to change this from spawn to capture. Then we're going to throw in our capacitor and make sure it's running. And boom, we're getting witch souls. Alright, so let's take a look at a few other things. If we go back up to my power room here, I made a screen and an RF Tools screen controller during my work on the RF Tools matrix, but I didn't bother setting anything up. We are now getting into a place where I am actually going to be using quite a bit of power for doing things like the draconic crafting or the extended crafting, the crafting core for making charged draconium, for instance, used up a decent amount of power, and so will some of the other fusion stuff and draconic evolution stuff. So I figured, hey, I might as well pull these out of the old ME matrix and set them up here. So matrix 1 is this bad boy over here. It's sort of my main go-to, and you can see I've got it reporting its strength, and its basically total charge is 204 giga RF, or 204 billion RF. And then this one is matrix 2. This is my backup reserves, and it's got another 400 billion. And I haven't used these a lot, but if we shift right click in here, you can basically see I have a text that says matrix 1. This is my heading. Then we have the bar showing RF in compact form, so it doesn't list a huge number. It just compresses it to giga. And I didn't put a label on it because I wanted a bigger size label. And then underneath that I have RF%. Then I have a text module with nothing, just to put a space in between them. And then matrix 2 has a title, and RF compact, and RF%. So yeah, it's a quick and easy way to just sort of make this more. Now I can just eyeball it by passing through. Keep an eye on things. I got a little laser mining going on there. I'll come back to that in a moment. Let's take a look upstairs. So I did bring I had my crafting core set up on top of an induction matrix early on because it was a good way to power it before I had flux networks. But I have flux networks now, and so now I can bring it up here, and you can see there's a flux point underneath it. And I've done just, the bare minimum automation here. Just basically 20 pedestals with 20 hoppers feeding into them. I don't know that we're going to need to do serious automation for this. The other thing I did was I finished the fusion crafting core from Draconic Evolution, and the fusion crafting injectors, and I upgraded all tin injectors to Wyvern because we're going to need that. And again, we're just going to do it some quick and dirty automation with hoppers here. So we'll see how that works shortly when we get back into that. And over here in my war room, where we're looking at what we need to build up for stuff, we've got ultimate ingots going on. So I'm mapping out my ultimate ingots, and I did go through and made sure I had at least a stack of all the ingots going into these except Awakened Draconium. So we'll need to travel a bit further into Draconic Evolution to get ourselves some Awakened Draconium. And just sort of going through these star metal. So I didn't have a ton of star metal. I basically just did subsistence levels of star metal to get through astral sorcery. But I did set up a few things just to sort of get me enough that I can make a couple stacks, which I now have plenty, so I can tear that down. But I thought I'd show you real quick what we did for that. One thing that's sort of an important tip for people in this mod pack that you may not know is that the world spawn collector crystals, the floating crystals, can be used for starlight transmutation. So in other words, you can take the, as soon as you get to a tier 2 altar and can make a, do I have it in here? This guy, the linking tool from Astral Sorcery. You can actually link one of these world spawn crystals to a spot, and it will transmute things in that spot. So basically just, and this is how I got through my subsistence stuff. It's just, while I was in the early days of this pack, as soon as I had a linking tool, I actually linked this to 4 or 5 spots. And then I would come over here and throw down a bunch of iron ore and wander off and come back later and get myself a little bit of star metal ore. And I just did that a few times, and it was enough to get me through the mod pack, or get me through the chapter. But now that I'm going to need, possibly a couple stacks more of it, I figured I might as well, pull some of these things out of the old ME system and set something up a little more automated. So, oh, hell yeah, I need to stop this. So basically what I've got going on here is I've got an industrial foregoing block placer that is placing iron ore, which we can go ahead and stop that. I'll tear all this down after the video. So it's placing iron blocks in front of it, and then we've got a block breaker that is breaking them. However, the block breaker works fast. There's only 5 ticks, or like, what is that? That's like, milliseconds between when it tries to break it. So this RF Tools timer set at 120 just delays it. So basically now, instead of trying to break a block every 5 ticks, it tries to break it basically every 120 plus ticks. And so that gives it a little time to turn. And you can see maybe some lag spike or something. There were a few times here where it didn't, where it still pulled the trigger a bit soon, because the amount of time it takes to turn this iron ore into a star metal ore varies. And so maybe that was on the extreme end of long, or maybe there was a little bit of lag in there or something. But anyway, that's what's going on here. So it turned it, our timer's counting down, and so you can see here I gave it a lot of buffer, but you can also see here I've been letting this run and I have plenty. So I'm going to come here and clean all this up in a bit. That's more star metal than I will ever need for anything. And then the other thing I did for star metal, because I wasn't sure exactly how much I was sort of in a hurry to get the first batch of them, so I sort of double dipped. I had a laser base and laser drills in the bank, so I went ahead and opened them up. I put 4 blue laser lens into them to sort of target star metal. If we look at the uses, You can see that star metal ore gets targeted by the blue laser lens. Any biome, uh, 0 to 255. Can't use it in the hell in the end, etc., etc. And so I did this, and I went ahead and put speed upgrade 1, speed upgrade 2, energy upgrade 1, and energy upgrade 2 into these. Basically, what the energy upgrades do is, let's see, I forget what it was. So it puts in a certain amount of work energy. Basically, these use power, RF, to make work energy, and then they beam that work energy into the laser base. And when the work energy reaches 100%, it fires off the mining laser. And I think, if I recall correctly, there's a max of 9,000 RF per tick. Normally, that goes off every 8 ticks. But when you put in energy upgrade 1, it'll allow it to do it every 6 ticks, and energy upgrade 2 allows it to do every 4 ticks. So the energy upgrades actually allows you to push more energy through the laser drills, therefore making more RF over time. And then of course the speed upgrade just makes it faster too as well. I think that basically speeds things up as well. I'm not exactly sure how this works. All I know is I put a bunch of things in there and away we went. And with flux points, it's not a hard thing to make sure that you have at least 9,000 RF per tick going through these. And so these have been going, and I've been getting lots of blue ores, so I need to turn this off as well. So I'll tear this down after the video as well. If we look at ore, so I fat finger my typing here, and sort by this. So I think I'm getting extra dimensional shard ore, maybe, an apatite, definitely lapis, which I certainly don't need any more of that. You can see I've gotten 1,000 sapphire ore, even using up, I think, a stack of star metal ore. I've still got, 400 or some of that, plus all the stacks I have out at the other place. So we've got plenty of this stuff now. So I'll turn this off and tear it down after the video. So if we go back upstairs and continue to work through the ultimate ingot progress, there were a few other ones that I wanted to specifically mention. So star metal, if you haven't mass produced that, now you have a couple of ways to do that. Let's see, what else? The demon ingots, so I ended up needing a bunch of demon ingots, not only for this, but also for the gargantuan demonic drums for the creative one. So I'll talk about those more in a second. One of the harder ones is or not harder ones, but it can catch you with your shorts down, is the hop graphite ingot. So hop graphite ingots from immersive engineering, you make coal dust. So 1 coke coal makes 1 coal dust, and then 8 coal dust make 1 hop graphite ingot. So the bottom line is, to make a stack of hop graphite ingots, you need 8 stacks of coal coke. So that wasn't a big deal for me. If we look at this, I still have 28 blocks of coal coke. But I wanted to talk about that a moment, because if you're making this through a coke oven, that's a crap load of coke. But if we go here through, let's get out of here. Let's go coke. So one thing that's nice about this, if you're playing 1.75 E2E that has the updated Ice and Fire, is that if we look at coal coke, and let's see, this is the recipe. So a block of coal coke can be made out of 9 ice and fire ashes. So the dragon roosts from ice and fire that are on the surface often have big piles of ashes around them, and so it's not unlikely to pick up, a few dozen ash every time you raid a above ground dragon thing, and that means that it's not too hard to get a few blocks of coal coke, like several blocks of coal coke, from each dragon that you kill above ground. And in addition, you can make more ash by all of the charred stuff that is up there. 9 of those make 1 of those. So if you vein mine an entire roost above ground and get all of the charred stone and charred dirt and charred grass path and charred gravel, charred cobblestone, etc., and turn all of that into ash, and then turn all of that ash into blocks of coal coke, you can end up with quite a lot of coal coke, and that makes the hop graphite much easier to get through than trying to push a bunch of stuff through some slow-ass coke oven. So that is a tip for getting the hop graphite. And again, the underground ones, pardon me, the underground layers for dragons, I haven't seen really ash down there, but they have gazillions of the charred stone and whatnot. So again, if necessary, it's not too hard to get a whole lot of coal coke. So another one that didn't come up really was this lithium manganese dioxide alloy. This one stumped me for a moment. So if we look at this guy, it is made in the alloy furnace, or however you want to do it, alloy smelter, from lithium and manganese dioxide. Okay, so far so good. Manganese dioxide is basically made from manganese oxide infused with liquid oxygen. Manganese oxide is made from, I think this is about where I got lost. It's not really easy to tell from JEI and trying to follow the rabbit hole down where all this stuff comes from. But the bottom line is, this is the recipe you need to start this off. You'd take crushed rhodochrosite, which crushed rhodochrosite is either rhodochrosite in the manufactory, and rhodochrosite can be made from rubies through your atomic reconstructor, or another place to get rhodochrosite is the rock crusher, so rock crushing granite. So this is what I end up doing just to preserve unnecessary ruby usage. So I put a bunch of granite through my rock crusher, got a bunch of crushed rhodochrosite, then used the rhodochrosite, I smelted it to get the manganese oxide, and then that allowed me to use the fluid infuser to take some oxygen, liquid oxygen, and put it into my manganese oxide to make manganese dioxide, and then that finally allowed me to make the lithium manganese dioxide ingots. So anyway, that's your entry point to this whole mess. Liquid oxygen, it depends on what you're doing. Basically, I just put a tap into my deuterium production. Basically, I'm trash canning liquid oxygen from nuclear craft from my nuclear craft fusion reactor. So I just interrupted my trash can and collected some liquid oxygen. So that wasn't too bad. But it did take me a moment to figure out that all of this starts with rhodochrosite from the rock crusher or from atomically reconstructed rubies. What else about the thing? The only other thing that came up really was we needed a bunch of psi metal ingots. which I think I talked briefly about that with the needing Psi-Metal for the shape card for RF tools. But now we also needed ebony Psi-Metal and ivory Psi-Metal. And if we look at those, that is taking normal Psi-Metal and adding this ebony substance around them. And if we take a look at that, that is made with the trick spell, ebony and ivory. And you can turn this trick fired out of your Psi-Metal gun. You can turn coal into ebony, and you can turn nether quartz into the ivory substances. You have to do that in the end. If we do here, if we hover over trick, ebony, and ivory, it infuses coal and quartz while in the end, while still infusing redstone, gold, and diamonds. So basically the gold, infusing the gold gives you Psi-Metal, and then you make a bunch of this ebony and ivory substance. And I can just sort of demonstrate that real quick. So if we have, do I have any coal on me? Let's grab a little coal. Also, it appeared as if this, the amount of power it took was just related to shooting the gun. So basically you can throw down stacks of these at a time and hit them all with the gun at the same time, and that seemed to work fine. Where's my spell gun? There it is. So I did have to learn a bit more, go a bit higher in Psi-Metal to learn the trick ebony and ivory and put it into my new gun, but it wasn't too big of a deal. But yeah, you can just throw stuff out there, and if you look at my energy bar on the right, oops, I missed, but you can see it uses a good chunk of your energy bar, so you want to let yourself recharge before you fire again. And then if we fire again and miss again, obviously I'm not good at this. Oh, it has to be in the end. Derp. I just got through saying it had to be in the end, and here I forgot. So if we do that, just want to demonstrate this real quick. Run to the end. Grab some coal, some nether quartz. Shoot it with a gun. Boom. So there's a stack of the ivory substance and a stack of the ebony substance. And that used up about 3/4 of our power for that shot. So basically, you can make a whole bunch of this stuff at once. You can even throw down your gold ingots and turn them into Psi-Metal all at once. So that wasn't too bad. I am definitely not a pro at Psi in that I am trying to learn it. I've only had to learn it to do these Psi-Metal infusions. But there was a good video on YouTube from a user named Xogue, Xogue. So if you search Psi-Metal and Xogue, it'll show you what you had to do. But basically, you got to make this trick and then load it into your gun, and that's how you do it. But that's about enough of that. So those were sort of the only ones that were sort of interesting. A lot of the rest of this stuff was just plain old stuff. I guess the last thing I will say is that you do end up using a lot of Elementium and Terra Steel and whatnot. I have never made Terra Steel or Elementium through Britannia. I've got it all from arc furnace recycling. So I guess that's another important safety tip, is that if you go ahead and set up an arc furnace, you can see here's another 30 Terra Steel and another 32 Elementium since the last time I checked this box, and another several Superium, which is another thing we'll mention in a second. And basically it just pulls out of, I've got an export bus that pulls anything from my mob farm, so some armor goes into, I allow some armor into my ME network. This exports those chunks out, For instance, all Elementium and all Terra Steel, which are the ones I'm most interested in out of my mob farm. Then it goes up to a powered spawner, powered diamond anvil to get repaired so that I actually get a good amount of ingots out of it. And then it feeds over into the arc furnace to be recycled and spits out the stuff over here. So that helped a lot with the, especially the Elementium and Terra Steel. Alright, so I think that's about all the wisdom I have gleaned about making ultimate ingots. Let's take a look at our creative fluid tank, which is another thing that I'm keen on making. This is sort of my top priority now. It's just to do whatever I need to do. I need Anglesite, which is why we're working on those souls downstairs. And I need ultimate ingots to complete this. And then we're going to need a few things from Draconic Evolution to fill in the middle. But let's take a look at some of these fluids, and I can show you which ones I encountered that I was like, oh, really? Okay. So the first one I noticed was Goat Milk Bucket from Animania. Haven't really played with the premium animals from Animania much. In my first playthrough, I grabbed a couple cows and had a hard time keeping them fed and not thirsty, and had a hard time breeding them, and got sick of them and moved on because I didn't really need them. But you absolutely need the goat milk here, and so I had to figure it out. So what I did was I had a few pendulums. I sort of like these things. I found them in various dungeons, summoning pendulums, and you can basically right-click on things like you would a golden lasso, and it'll hold up to 5 entities. So I just grabbed one of those out of the bank, went and grabbed myself some goats. So here are some goats. I happen to remember where some goats were, so I went and got some alpine bucks. I found 1 buck and 2 does, and I brought them back. And you can see I've got more now. I actually had to kill some off because they were fighting and getting on my nerves. But I don't know why I have 2 troughs here of water, but whatever. So I set up a trough for water to try and keep them watered. This has a sink underneath it to keep it filled. Really, guys? Really? You're going to come at me like that? So... Go away. They sometimes get thirsty and don't drink. So I'm not exactly sure what their deal is. So I was a little worried about that. I started out with a water trough above ground, and sometimes they would get thirsty and not drink from it. Sometimes they would drink from it. So then I lowered it into the ground, and then I also put some water over here just to give them the maximum chances of being not thirsty. And then I also originally in this chest, probably got rainwater in it. Yeah, look at that, 200 millibuckets from rain, maybe. Shouldn't be raining here though. Anyway, whatever. Originally this was for food. I put wheat in there, but these guys will also eat sticks. So I just sort of let them do their thing. I tried to keep them fed, and I tried to keep them watered. And in theory, if they are fed and watered for a couple of game days, they will get happy. And once they get happy, they can breed. So I basically threw them out here, would come out and visit them every once in a while and fill up their food trough. And then one time I came out here and there were 2 extra adults. And I was like, oh, damn, I missed it. So apparently to get milk out of the does, to right-click a bucket on them and get milk, it has to be shortly after they have bred. So I was like, okay, whatever. So then I wandered off and did more collection of fluids and collection of ingots. I came out here and saw some baby goats, and I was like, aha. So then I clicked a bucket on 3 or 4 of the does and finally found a doe that still had some milk and got my bucket of milk. But anyway, that's something to think about, is these guys. And that's how I did it. Oh, and by the way, I was a bit confused at first what counted as a goat. If it's a ewe, it's a sheep. If it's a doe, it's a goat. So those, don't try and milk a ewe, milk a doe. And if it's a doe and it looks like a rabbit, then it's a rabbit, not a goat. I wasn't really confused, but I could see myself. I could see myself trying to milk a ewe, going, "This looks sort of like a goat." So that was the goat milk. We got that. Wasn't too horribly hard. A lot of this other stuff, blood was I think just rotten flesh in the melted down. A lot of this other stuff we just sort of had on hand. Oh, I did want to talk a bit about demonic metal. So I did have a little bit of a hard time. Not a hard time. I had to do some experimentation to figure out how to melt demon metal. So to make demon metal and demon metal ingots, you can basically underneath this melter is a block of lava. To make demonic ingots, you can have 4 nether bricks surrounding a block of lava. You only need 4 nether bricks. I just built extra because I seem to be losing some gold. And then you just chuck the gold in, and you can, chuck it in like this, a stack at a time, and mostly get it back. I did lose a couple of stacks of gold, but it wasn't a big deal. I have tons of gold. So that gave me my demonic ingots that I needed for the ultimate ingot, and it also gave me the ingots that I needed for the creative tank. Requires 16 of these bad boys. Each of these requires a demonic large plate. I have those set up to be made from 1 block through a metal press. But as you can see, if we go here to my auto crafting, I already had this set up just to make the initial gargantuans that I'm using. But that was only, I think, 4 of them. When you go here and you tell it you want 16, one of the things you'll notice is that we're looking for a total of like 5,000, about 5,600 iron plates. So that bogged all of this down. Most of this wasn't too difficult, but to make all of these iron drums that are required, that was a bit of a lot of plates. So all I can say about that is that if you've just got iron plates set up to go through a metal press as your automation, that's going to take you a couple hours, and I am not a patient man. So I did have a couple of pressurizers over here, and I just quickly set up a double chest, filled it with iron, funneled those into the pressurizers with speed upgrades on them, and just bashed out a few extra 1,000 iron plates to help out my poor metal press that was looking a bit in shock when I asked it for 5,000 iron plates. And then for melting the demonic metal, I of course threw it in here with lava, and it did not melt. So I went to Novus and I grabbed some blazing pyrotheum, threw it in there, and it still would not melt with blazing pyrotheum in a standard seared brick smelter. Not sure about a scorched brick smelter, but I didn't feel like making one if I had another option. So I made the melter from Tinker's Construct and put blazing pyrotheum under it, and that did the trick. This was how I finally melted the demonic metal ingot and made a bucket of demonic metal for my creative fluid tank. So that's sort of an important tip. I will also say that at 144 millibuckets per ingot, if you do, I think it's several ingots to get 1 bucket out, you end up with a little bit of dribs and drabs in there. And for that, what worked was for cleaning that out, what worked was the gauge dropper from Mechanism. So if you're not familiar with this bad boy, You can either right click it on the outside of things, like if we do it here, if I right click on that tank, it fills up sort of like you would a bucket. But the nice thing about it is that you can then move things around. You put it back. You can even, I don't necessarily want to get rid of my blazing pyrotheum, but if we come over here to the sink, you can see now I've sucked up 1,000. This has a max of 1,000 millibuckets, or 1 bucket. And then if you shift right click on the ground, you void it. So now it's emptied. So this is a quick way to get rid of, if you have just a little bit of leftover liquids in a tank or something, the gauge dropper is an excellent tool for that. And another thing that's sort of cool about the gauge dropper is that for a lot of machines, not all machines, but a lot of machines, it will actually work on their, yeah, it won't work on this bad boy. Yeah, let's go ahead and get rid of that canola oil. So there's a case where, taking out 80 millibuckets of canola oil and destroying it by shift right clicking on the ground is exactly the kind of use I would have for this. In some mods like Mechanism and Thermal Foundation, you can also use this in the interface. So you can right click on liquids on these graphics and pick them up out of here too. So that especially is handy for Mechanism, where they won't interact with buckets and you can't grab the liquids from the outside. Quite often you can shift right click in here to either void the tank in Mechanism, or to pick it up and then shift right click it on the ground to get rid of it. So I just thought I'd mention the gauge dropper in case you haven't used that, because I ran into multiple cases when I was making all of these liquids where I needed to deal with leftovers. So all of these liquids I made, which was actually sort of fun. It was sort of like a scavenger hunt, but there were lots of cases here where I needed to use the gauge dropper. So let's see, the other ones, I guess the only other couple that were sort of odd were, there are multiple ways to make ethanol. So for these 32 buckets of ethanol, I went ahead and chose, if we look at how to make it, basically the two ways are the still from forestry, which turns biomass into ethanol, or the fractionating still to make that. I had a fractionating still set up for making rosin, so that was a piece of cake. But now if we take a look at how to get biomass, this is where things get interesting. So the fermenter is weird. I spent about 1 second looking at it and not getting it, and then I just took off and said, no, I'll just do this a different way. So basically you put in some sort of liquid, and then you put in some sort of thing that you're doing there, and then you put in some sort of fertilizer, and then it all comes eventually into biomass. This was a little bit too complicated and a little bit too fussy for me, so I went ahead and made the melter from Cyclic, because this was a piece of cake to make. And then I had a bunch of carrots from a garden cloche that I was using to feed some pigs when I was making pork for plowman's lunches. And so basically I just turned back on. That reminds me I should turn off my carrots. Yeah, got plenty of carrots. Turn that off. So basically I had a few stacks of carrots and I made a few more stacks of carrots, and just set up some really quick and dirty automation. I used tick acceleration to get a lot of biomass quickly, fed that into a tank, ran it up here. The melter needs a block of lava under it, which is why it's out here. Took that biomass to my fractionating still, and boom, away you go. So I did a little extra sort of ghetto hookups here to mass produce some specialty things. much like I did for the extra iron plates over on my pressurizers. I did a little extra work here, put in some extra pipes to do some extra stuff for getting biomass and ethanol through this real quick. So I'll clean this back up now that I'm done. I did similar things over here, but I've already cleaned it up for Primal Mana and IC2 coolant. I set up some temporary tanks and just bashed through a whole bunch of IC2 coolant here, and then for making Primal Mana. So I just made huge stockpiles of some of that stuff. I think the only other confusing bucket, so it took me a minute to look at the forestry fermenter for biomass and go, wait, what? That's too complicated. And it took me a minute to figure out how to make molten demonic metal until I got blazing pyrotheum in a melter. The other one was the Pahoho lava. So the problem is that if you go into JEI and go Pahoho, and you look at this stuff, the fluid transposer is just about filling things, as is the squeezer. So there is no recipe here for how to make Pahoho lava. And I was like, what? Is this a world spawn? Do I have to go find it in the world? What's going on here? And I was confused at first until I finally, it dawned on me to mouse over this and see where it's from. Industrial craft. So then I Googled industrial craft and Pahoho lava. And apparently that's part of this whole thing. So the liquid heat exchanger, if you put lava into it and then cool it, it'll come out as Pahoho lava. So basically I put a bucket of lava in here, and that shoved it up into this slot and gave me the empty bucket back. I put some heat conductors in here to speed it up. And then if we look over here, this steam boiler, I didn't even need to do anything here. I didn't hook up water. I didn't do anything to it. I just set it down next to it, and it worked for one bucket. But yeah, basically that's how I got it. So the Pahoho lava came over here. I put an empty bucket here, and it filled the bucket up and gave me a bucket of Pahoho lava there. So that was a bit of a head scratcher for a moment. But yeah, so that's the kind of stuff I've been up to. As you can see, we've got lots of stuff here. All the rest of this stuff I pretty much had on hand, or it wasn't too hard to make. I ended up making a whole bunch of Primal Mana and a whole bunch of IC2 coolant. I sort of overmade IC2 coolant, but whatever. Most of this stuff wasn't too hard. The black hole tanks, I forget if there was something... I don't think there was anything too hard about these. You do need inner air bottles from clicking empty bottles on the ground in the end, and you do need the Gaia spirits from the Gaia fights in Britannia. But you've probably got that stuff if you're trying to make a creative fluid tank. So that is about that. I'm trying to think what else I was up to. Let me pause here and see what our runtime looks like, and then also ruminate about anything else I might have done in the last 2 days that I might want to share with you guys, and I'll be right back. Okay, we've got a few minutes left, and I did want to show you one other thing that I did set up. We're going to need for the Anglesite, for the octadic capacitors, we're going to need, is that right? Yeah, grains of infinity. The basic capacitors require grains of infinity, so we're going to need a bunch of that. If we go here and we tell it we want, to make, like, you know, say 70 of these bad boys. You can see what's holding us back there is largely grains of infinity. Coal coke, I just got to turn blocks into coal coke for that, not a problem. And I can make a bunch of treated wood planks. I have a huge tank of creosote in the bank, but we need a couple hundred grains of infinity. and I'm not going to stand around and click the ground a bunch of times for that. So I did go ahead and set something up here. Dispensers. Each pirate ship out in the world has about I don't know, about 12 dispensers. So I've ransacked a couple of those in my past, knowing that I would need dispensers at some point. So I grabbed those out of the bank. So we've got dispensers here, and go ahead and set some of these back up. They've burned through their first batch of flint and steels. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to put flint and steels in them, and then every time the redstone signal goes off, they are going to use the flint and steel there. And then we've got a vacuum chest up here. Oh, hey, look at that. We've got a few. We've got a few of these. How many do I have? 627. We have all we need. All right, there you go. Turns out that 20 dispensers with a flint and steel each will give you plenty of grains of infinity. So I guess I won't load up the rest of them. One thing that you do want to do, though, is that if you try this method, is that the dispensers, if left alone, if you just turn them on with this redstone signal, they'll just click and click and click and click and click, and they'll basically destroy the flint and steel while they're waiting for the fire to burn. So what you want to do is you want to put an RF Tools timer or some other timing mechanism if you're using this, and give it some delay. I'm using 160 seconds, 160 delay here. You can just sort of play with what feels right to you. But basically, every time it clicks while the fires are still going, you're using up a bit of your flint and steel. So you don't necessarily want to be doing tons of clicking while the fires are still going. But 160, it's you can go up to, like, if you really want to be efficient with your flint and steel, you can take that up to probably like 300 and be fine. I got it 160 because I knew I was probably going to get plenty from this setup. And yeah, we got plenty. So now we have all the grains of infinity we will probably ever need. So put that away. So that's another thing I'm doing, and again, that's just for the Anglesite, for the octadic capacitors, since we need to make a bunch of these bad boys. Let's see what else is going on. So another thing we got to do for the Anglesite, which is required for both the Infinity Booster card, this bad boy, so that I can use my wireless terminal from a ME system anywhere. I'm sort of eager to get that. It's not required, and I don't truly need it, but it's still sort of handy. But we also need a whole bunch of quantum entangled singularity, which is made by dropping a normal singularity and some interdust and a little explosion, like some tiny TNT going off next to it. So we need a bunch of singularities. I want to make up about a batch of 36 Anglesite. So I'm going to need like a whole bunch of these, at least like 18 singularities, probably like 20 some to be safe. And so we're going to need to make a bunch of the ME storage components, and then we need to go ahead and make this machine by condensing 10,000 pistons, which I have ready in a quantum compressor. So I got to get this whole thing working. So between this episode and next, I'll get this all going, so we can do that. Then we'll batch produce a bunch of Anglesite. But then, just to avoid any surprises, I have also been, just prior to starting this video, I was taking a look at what I might need here. So I've got my energized clathrites. These are basically all the components of Anglesite, and started working on the souls, which is where we started this video. The souls for the various Ender IO crystals. So yeah, singularities, Anglesite, Awakened Draconium, For the creative tank, we need Awakened Cores. So we need Awakened Draconium for that as well. And we also need a Chaotic Core. So this is going to be the sticking point for getting our creative tank. We have to fight the Ender Dragon to get a Chaos Shard. Once we get a Chaos Shard, I think we can use UU Matter to make extras. But we will have to fight the Ender Dragon at least once. And for that, we're going to need probably some Draconic Armor and capacitors and various other doodads. So I've started looking at what I might really need for extra toys I might like for the Chaos Dragon fight. I googled and someone mentioned the player interface. So basically, this player interface is bound to me. It's sort of like a phantom face. So it's bound to me, and so I'm pumping FE into the player interface, which is essentially pumping FE into me. So it's keeping my wireless crafting terminal charged. I've noticed that. And apparently it will also help keep my Draconic evolution armor, my Draconic armor charged during the fight. I assume we have to take this with us. With a couple of boosters on it, it'll have 128 block range. So presumably we would take this and a couple of boosters and a flux point with us when we find the Chaos Dragon, and we would set this up somewhere nearby and then go into the fight. And that will help us also with keeping our Draconic armor charged during the fight. So I've been taking a look at that kind of stuff. Let me pause again here. We're probably getting near the end of this episode, but I did want to at least run something through my new fusion crafting course setup on camera. So let me grab something and we'll make something. And be right back. Okay, I remembered what I was going to put through here in this episode. We're going to make our first Awakened Draconium. So Awakened Draconium blocks. This is why we had to upgrade our injectors to Wyvern tier. That's why I went ahead and did that in between episodes. So Draconic cores, those we've seen before. Charged Draconium blocks, those we've seen before. Dragon hearts. So the good news is you get these from killing the Ender Dragon, but you can also get, if we take a look at okay. If we take a look at Ice and Fire, you can also get Fire Dragon Hearts and Ice Dragon Hearts, and those will convert straight across to the Draconic Evolution Hearts. And then lastly, we can also make those with UU Matter. So if we take a look here, for 2 buckets, which is actually quite a lot of UU Matter, but at this late stage of the game, we've got 748 buckets, so not a huge deal, but you can also then make them with UU Matter. Or you can kill the Ender Dragon multiple times for them. So that's that. Grades of Infinity we just looked at. Grades of the End are made from the, which crystal is that? It's the Ender Crystal. You just grind that up in a sag mill. And Ender Crystal, we just happen to be making a bunch of those. Require Enderman Souls, so you saw me make a bunch of those earlier. So we made some of those up and ground them up. And then Dragon Stones are just mana diamonds thrown through the Elven trade portal for Britannia. Edge Charged Draconium blocks are just Draconium blocks put through this bad boy with a whole bunch of energy dumped into them. So we're going to go ahead and see what we can do here. I haven't tried to bulk anything through here before yet, so let's go ahead and just start loading stuff up. Let's see, we're going to put a bunch of draconic cores over here. I don't think this thing is really sided, so when it shows that you're going to have 4 on one side and 4 on another, I don't think that's really true. This is just, a graphic. But I'm going to be doing it that way anyway, just to keep things straight in my mind. So we've got some cores over there. Let's go ahead and put some hearts and some grains of infinity. We can throw those in here. And then over on this side, we can throw in some more draconic cores, and more draconic cores, and some grains of the end, and some dragon stones. And so now we can see everything's up on our pedestal, and those will re-auto-populate thanks to the hoppers. And then we just got to throw in some charged draconium, and now it verifies our recipe, shows that it's going to take that charged draconium and turn it into awakened ingots, or blocks of awakened ingots. So let's go ahead and hit start, and we're charging. I do have a flux point on each injector just to make sure that they're getting tons of power, as fast a power as they can get. And it's moving with pretty good speed. If I used one flux point and then spread it out with cables, I would be limited to the amount of RF transfer the cables were limited to, whereas the flux points can transfer up to 10 million at a time. So as you can see, this is moving pretty quickly. The one thing I didn't do was set up a way to automatically, I didn't set up a hopper and a chest like I did down below on this guy, so I'll have to manually pull these out and throw in the next ones, but I will get that set up for in the future. So that's cooking. One of the things I sort of want to keep an eye on is how much power I'm using. So if we run downstairs and just take a glance here, we're still at 100%, so we're not cooking through that much RF. Not too horrible. Alrighty, so we'll pull that out. Can I put in 8? Yeah. We'll see what happens. So cool. This will allow us to start making draconic armor, I think. It'll allow us to do a lot of things. Get us one step closer to our creative fluid tank. There's a whole bunch of draconic stuff that we're going to need this for. Also, if we take a look at our quest log, what do we need to do here? We need to break it into ingots so we can get credit for that. And then we also need to create a sharpened kit to get credit for that. Okay, so I can dump the whole stack into the table. So that just means I need a chest, filtered chest to pull the finished products out to keep this going in my absence. So I will just have another chest with a filter like I did down there, and I'll just tell it to pull out blocks of Awakened Draconium. And the next time I make a bunch of this stuff, that's what we'll do. So let's see. Let's turn all of this into ingots for a moment. So we got another advancement in. Ooh, we get some free stuff there. That's cool. That's very cool. So that's going to be Draconic Evolution. Claim. Alright, I guess we could make this guy too, but I don't... Extracts dragon eggs from living ender dragons. We can sort of make dragon eggs, so I'm not too worried about that, but we will make that for the thing. So let's see, that is our fusion crafting core in action. So now you've seen that. Again, I just want to double check and make sure that my power is looking good still. Oh yeah, plenty of power. This must not take as much power as some of the other things I've been doing. Let's see, that was 400 million RF, but we're making 4.8 per tick. 4.8 million. So that means that is that's only 12 ticks, which is less than a second. So yeah, I guess we don't have to worry about that. Alrighty, so that is, I think, the episode. Is there anything else that I did that I wanted to tell you guys about? Let's just take a look real quick at what we need to do next. Draconic Helm. Oh, so I guess we need to make the Wyvern armor first. Okay, so this is going to take some effort. So we got to get a Yeti horned helm, and an Arctic hood. So these are some things we're going to have to go back to the Twilight Forest to get some stuff done. Most of this stuff I have or can make. But yeah, so that's going to slow us down a bit on the Wyvern stuff, is this Twilight Forest thing. So we're going to have to go find us some Alpha Yetis. And then what else do we need for the Wyvern? Yeah, a whole bunch of Yetis. The rest of that we can do. So I guess most of this is going to be pretty easy, other than getting Arctic fur and Yeti fur. The rest of this is all good to go. We have tons of most of this stuff, or can make it. So Wyvern will be good, and then we can move on to Draconic. What do we have for surprises there? Angel rings, yay. Hopefully that means it has flight built into it. Or do you have to actually make a different angel ring for each piece here? Do we really need to make 4 angel rings? That would be sort of wild. We could do it, but it'd be sort of wild. The mantles of stars we can make. We might have to infuse a few new crystals, like that one, for instance. Oh, it'll use any one. Okay, so that's no big deal. Our Wyvern stuff we will have. Resonant cell frames we have. Ultimate ingots we have. Yeah, so basically we're going to be good to go. We just need to make a bunch more Awakened Draconium, which I'm cooking up some more calcium sulfate for that. We should be good to go. It looks like the only real stumbling block here is the Arctic hood and the Yeti horned hood. So I'll need to go look around for some snowy biomes, apparently, in the Twilight Forest. For that, since Creative Flight doesn't work there, my Angel Ring doesn't work there, which makes getting around the Twilight Forest sort of annoying. So I might actually make myself another Ring of the Squid, because Ring of the Squid plus Glider seems to work really well there. So I might go ahead and do that. So yeah, we got that coming up. I also want to make a Draconic bow. And again, that's just, we need to make a bunch more Awakened Draconium, which we just made some of, but we need to make a bunch more. And a Wyvern bow, which is going to be... That's not bad. That's not bad. So yeah, this is all pretty easy. So we'll make a wyvern bow and turn it into a draconic bow. And we'll go fetch some stuff from the Twilight Forest and make our wyvern armor and turn it into draconic armor. And then we can go fight the Chaos Dragon. I might also want I think there's some sort of capacitor here that gives you extra power for your draconic armor. So we'll probably have to look at that. These flux capacitors. So we'll probably want to make some of these baubles, which looks pretty doable. Again, it's just more awakened. So I need to ramp up my calcium sulfate production for dragon cores quite a bit so that I can make more Awakened Draconium, and we should be good to go there. So we should go ahead and make some of this stuff as well, so that we have some extra power on us. So that's the kind of stuff that's coming up over the next couple episodes, and we are probably over time, so I should stop rambling and end this episode. So yeah, we're gonna get our quantum compressor and madam condenser going, make our infinity booster cards, make our Anglesite. We now have we can now make awakened cores because we have some awakened draconium. Ultimate catalysts we can make as soon as we have make some ultimate ingots, which we can now do thanks to being able to plug this hole here. So now we can make up to at least 64 ultimate ingots. We're not going to make that many to start. I think I only need about 25 to start, and then we'll come back and revisit this later. I just want to make enough now to get us started. But yeah, things are going good. Anyway, I'll shut up. I'm sort of rambling as my mind processes all the things that I want to do over the next couple days. But that is a good episode. A lot of stuff was covered. A lot of progress was made towards endgame. So I will talk to y'all later. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or comments or tips, please leave them in the comment section and give me a like so that I know people are watching. Thanks a lot. Bye.